Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our first NSIN Propel info session. My name is Brianna Ryan, and I'm a program manager here at New Lab. Before we get started, a little background on NSIN Propel. As a partnership between New Lab, the National Security Innovation Network, and Decisive Point, NSIN Propel supports early-stage ventures with commercial applications to develop practical acquisitions knowledge and capacity necessary for success in the federal market. NSIN Propel is collaborating with the Rome, New York-based Air Force Research Laboratories Information Directorate to recruit companies new to the defense sector with technology solutions that can be adapted to address the needs of both the AFRL and the broader DoD community. Our open call for the program is now live, and applications close on May 19th. In today's info session, you will hear from Satish Rao, CPO of New Lab, and Tommy Hendricks, founding partner of Decisive Point. Satish and Tommy will take you through the opportunities and benefits of participating in the program, the defense curriculum, and what to expect during the application process. We are also joined today by Peter LaMonica, Chief of the High Performance Systems Branch of the Air Force Research Laboratory, who will be participating in and answering questions during the live Q&A following this session. Please feel free to submit your questions for the Q&A at any time during the info session using the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. Again, I thank you for joining us. And without further ado, I'd like to pass it over to Satish to get started.
Thanks, Brianna, and thank you for that great intro. And hello, everyone. I appreciate you joining us to hear more about the NSIN Propel program. So thank you for that overview, Brianna. And just to kind of dive into a little more detail, what are we aiming for to do in this program is we're looking at identifying what we call dual use technologies that can solve government defense needs. And so what do we mean by dual use? Is in this program, we're aiming to support early stage tech ventures that are developing, validating, or have products in market in commercial spaces where those technologies and applications we feel can solve big operational challenges for government and defense. And so the aim of this program is to support those companies through a process that's both, they'll speak more about later in this presentation. We're really excited to be working with, from New Lab's standpoint, really excited to be working with Decisive Point as a great partner who you'll hear more from today. The National Security Innovation Network that has conceived this concept of this program and has supported it in a variety of ways in the past and has a portfolio of accelerators supporting various verticals across technologies and industry sectors. And we'll be joined by the Air Force Research Labs Information Directorate to hear more directly from the source of a lot of the use cases and has a lot of thought and knowledge about the technologies that are relevant to this space. So why do we think we're well suited to really support early stage tech ventures in this program? Well, here's a nice overview of all the different stakeholders we think and all the different capabilities we bring together with New Lab and Decisive Point. And so first is the START network. We certainly have a strong network across a variety of verticals between the two organizations. And what we found and what we're finding is that many of the technologies and products being developed by these startups and early stage technology companies are really relevant to a variety of use cases within the Air Force and defense in general. And so if we look at New Lab's membership community, that's quite expensive and has grown quite a bit over the past 4 years, both in sort of scope, the sectors they cover, and definitely in really great business outcomes. And Decisive Points brings a similar network to the table. We have a variety of investors that are interested in this space. And so if you're an investor investing in, let's say, a company that's developing a sensor in the automotive space, you know, that company could also generate some interesting opportunities for themselves in the defense space as well. And that, again, that's what this program is about. So from an investor standpoint, I think this could be quite interesting to see the companies coming in the program. And if you do have companies in your portfolio that you think are relevant, you know, we'd be happy to hear more about them and meet with them as well. Decisive Point and New Lab are both investors. And so this is an opportunity for actual direct investment in this program based on the results and how it goes. The defense curriculum brought here is really unique, and that's you know, in some ways one of the most exciting things about being able to work with a partner in Decisive Point is understanding these use cases in the defense space, and then how do you navigate physically through this environment when it comes to procurement and contracting and really satisfying all the various requirements that are quite unique, as you can imagine, compared to, let's say, industries that we might have more familiarity with. And so this will certainly be woven into the program. We'll speak more about that. Tommy Hendricks will speak more about that during his portion of the discussion. And then finally, the physical space. New Lab is located in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. And so what that means for this program is that this is an opportunity to test. And so New Lab manages an 84,000 square foot warehouse environment. We're within a 300-acre Brooklyn Navy Yard campus that has roads. It's by water. We can fly drones. We can put things in the water. We can put things on the roads, sensors on buildings. And we also have a dedicated private 5G network and on-site edge compute stack, which is installed and managed by our partners in Verizon through another program. And so this would be also accessible to the teams that participate. Here are the focus areas that we think would be the most relevant for and what we're recruiting for now for this year's program. And so when we talk about sensors, what we mean by this is leveraging capabilities that allow one to sort of determine operational environments, sensing various aspects of machines or the environment. And we see a lot of applications in the areas of smart cities and sort of how sensors operate in urban environments that could be quite relevant here. We think manufacturing as well. We operate a program in mining, for example, where there's several companies developing sensors that could be relevant here. And so this can be both hardware and software, but we find that a lot of the things happening mostly in the smart cities environment could be quite relevant for this program. When we talk about connectivity, once again, it's how connectivity works in sort of urban and dense environments. And so 5G is certainly quite relevant here, and just as much bringing intelligence to the edge. And so we see this happen quite often in transportation, autonomous systems, distributed energy. And so a lot of the ways that you need to process information through a robust connectivity kind of network to be able to process on the edge is certainly relevant to some of the defense use cases that we're seeing here. And so think industrial automation again in manufacturing. When we talk about autonomous systems, there's a variety of aspects here that could be relevant. So how do you automate certain tasks? And very much similar to the manufacturing environment, we see tasks that are repetitive, that it could be quite dangerous to workers in a factory site. And so how do we augment the worker and sort of amplify their skills while removing them from dangerous and sort of repetitive tasks? And the same problem sets are happening in the defense environment as well. So being able to automate certain tasks, being able to explain how these autonomous systems make decisions, being able to put humans in the loop to train these systems are quite interesting applications for the use cases that we're exploring. And then finally, what I think undercuts all of this, as we all know, is data fusion and analytics. So you can kind of think of these first three verticals as being data sources, right? So sensors collect data, connectivity communicates that data, autonomous systems take in that data and make decisions and operate and take action based on that. So how do you fuse that all together with the existing infrastructure in some of our defense partners? And how do you analyze that data to understand or predict outcomes and also to better train these systems that you're trying to operate in safe and reliable ways? And so all things data fusion analytics will certainly be relevant and likely connected to some of the other opportunities we see in the first three verticals. At New Lab, we're applying our New Lab Studio model to execute this program. We think we've done quite well demonstrating the value in this type of approach in the other industries that we operate studios in. And we're gonna work with Decisive Point and NSIN and AFRL to take these startups through this approach here in this program. And so we start with a kickoff with our partner, in this case AFRL, to sort of identify and surface areas of focus. Those are the areas that we just showed above. And then maybe taking another layer down and really understanding what are the relevant use cases within sensors. What do you mean by sensing this or sensing that? What does that mean to you in terms of solving an operational challenge? We'll then go out and do the research and also the recruiting, which are underway right now, and understanding what are the capabilities in the world we think would be relevant to those use cases we learned about from our partner. And so what are the types of sensors we see in manufacturing? What are the autonomous systems we see being developed in, let's say, in terms of autonomous vehicles or shipping that we think could be relevant to as a capability we want to recruit for the program. And so we're working our way through that now while also publicly opening up about this program and attracting organically companies to apply and kind of raise their hand and say, I think I have something that could be really compelling here. Once we start meeting some of the applicants, we'll certainly down select to a certain group and convene them with our partners in AFRL, Decisive Point, and the National Security Innovation Networks and other relevant advisors. And so this will be facilitates a series of sessions where the problem solvers, you, the early stage tech ventures, will be sitting across the table from the problem owners. And these are the folks that represent the defense use cases, the ones who've been trying to solve certain problems for quite some time on their own and have thoughts on how your capability, your technology can be applied and match to the use case. And so creating that connection and sort of that conviction around pursuing a certain capability is the point of this program, and will be part of our process in selecting certain participants as well as designing the projects for the rest of the program. So, and what makes this model unique is it's not just about networking. And so we're not here to create, let's say 51st dates between you and the client, and hopefully it works out. We really believe when you're working with frontier technologies and solving complex use cases in environments like this, that you really have to build and test. And so you have to validate your products in real environments. And so we're going to do our best to simulate those environments at New Lab, or perhaps at other sites that we may have access to. But that's part of the plan in that convening is not just to understand, okay, this capability is interesting, we think it can solve this use case, but let's put together a brief testing plan to prove that out of it. And so we feel this data, and we have seen this data, is quite valuable to the startup themselves, because it just shows yet another approach to validating their product that they've been working on. At the same time, it builds momentum and conviction around the problem owner to pursue this technology through a procurement process. And so this is where Decisive Point comes in, and really helps in identifying what are the KPIs, what are the technical metrics, what else do we need to prove in this testing to get you to the next level. And so as we're running those pilots, we will certainly be looking for new opportunities for procurement. And so that's the goal of the program, is once exiting and completing your project, you've proven your capabilities to the point that now it's time to find a real defense opportunity for you through a procurement opportunity. And Tommy Hendricks will speak more about that. So just a bit about the outcomes that we're aiming for here. So first is to source and validate these technologies. I talked a bit about that in the model. And so we'll be out there looking for what we call non-traditional defense contractors. So what we mean are folks that are validating their products in the commercial space, and that could be relevant to some of the defense use cases that we're developing here. We're here to solve challenges, right? So as you can imagine, the defense has a host of operational and complex challenges as the world is changing, and technology quite often can be an answer to many of those challenges, as we also see in complex industrial environments. And so how do you solve those challenges? By really identifying a startup product mission fit, very much like we oftentimes find a startup product market fit when we're working with some of our industry partners. The transition to procurement is really key, and I think really unique in this program. So this is not necessarily about finding a way for you to apply for an SBIR program, although those are very important in supporting really important R&D efforts. But how do we get you into procurement? How do you win contracting and subcontracting opportunities with DoD programs or primes so that your product is sold and used by the DoD? And this can be quite a significant business opportunity and really a compelling technology validation opportunity as well. And then for you as a business to grow, we take no equity up front, and we have trusted private capital that we can use to support your abilities. So if during the program, there's an opportunity to invest, not only from Decisive Point or New Lab, there's access to our investor networks as well, where they can help you capitalize on the opportunity in front of you. It's time to raise some capital because now you've acquired a pretty reasonable contract. Fundraising seems to be a nice point to help you make that progress, and we're here to help you with that. So just a bit about New Lab. We are a community of entrepreneurs and engineers, and we do two things. We help early stage tech companies grow, and we help industry and government partners solve their challenges through innovation. And so our innovation engagements are quite often through our studio programs, and our support in early stage tech ventures, tech companies oftentimes come through our membership community and supporting them. And so we work with companies across robotics and AI and material science, anything frontier tech focused. Likely New Lab has a cohort of companies within our membership, or we work with them in some capacity in our studio programs. And we have a variety of engagements that we'll talk about in the next slide. Just by the numbers, 170 plus tech companies, really incredible growth across the value of these member companies over the years. We have very fortunate to have a high occupancy rate, even post-COVID, in our building at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. Several acquisitions. What some of the hardware companies really enjoy is the on-site prototyping facilities we have, which is quite unique for New York. A growing investor network with deals coming through our facility or through our programs quite often. And as I mentioned before, we've executed several innovation engagements with government and Fortune 500 companies over the years, very much similar to the program we're talking about today. Our innovation studios, as I mentioned, cut across a variety of verticals with a variety of great partners. And so our 5G studio, for example, with Verizon, is also based in New Lab at the Broken Navy Yard, where Verizon has installed and manages a private 5G network and on-site edge compute stack, where they're piloting companies in automation and manufacturing, robotics, energy. Our Circular City program is our oldest running innovation program, supported by the New York City Economic Development Corporation, identifying areas of opportunity to sort of improve the lives of our communities in the city through technology. We've executed several pilots across circularity, waste recovery, building energy efficiency, and so on in the city, which has been great. We run two mobility studios in Michigan, based in Detroit with Ford and Michigan Central, looking at areas such as AV, EV infrastructure charging, and how you support local communities in Detroit by solving really massive transportation challenges through mobility innovation. So I want to turn over to Tommy Hendricks, the founding partner of Decisive Point.
Thanks, Atish. A little bit about Decisive Point. Decisive Point is a venture capital firm focused on technology for government, public safety, and defense. We work with early stage companies really closely to help them navigate the federal acquisition space. And specifically, we bring together our team of folks that have previously held roles within government, specifically within the acquisitions and procurement, to help actually navigate not just entry into the federal market, but expansion and transition from early stage R&D contracts into longer procurement opportunities. So over the last 3 years, we've grown from starting out just working with companies to help them understand and navigate the defense space, to actually investing in those companies, scaling with them as they grow, and working alongside them really as their outsourced federal acquisitions team, so that they can focus on their commercial pathway while we help them navigate the government side of their business. As we've partnered with NSIN and New Lab here for the Propel Accelerator, our focus remains on that transition piece. Yes, we want emerging companies that have never done business with the government before to leverage programs like this to enter the federal market, but we're also really focused on, for the companies that have, potentially made some point of entry, whether it be through the SBIR program, through some of the relevant challenges that the Air Force and the Army and the Navy have been running, where do they go from there? How do they find that long-term partner on the government side? How do they find a transition home for their technology within a program of record or one of the PEOs? To get there, that's generally a heavier acquisitions lift. It involves understanding the federal market, understanding regulations and compliance, the accounting systems that the government uses, how to operate in secured environments. That's what we're here to help with. And that's what makes this program really unique. It's beyond the traditional accelerator model of helping you find product market fit within the government. We're actually taking that next step to help you navigate from, technology focus area into a specific problem that the government has that they're looking to fund solutions for. So as we think about how we are going to work through this within the scope of the accelerator, first, of course, understanding the DoD landscape is really important. Understanding the problems, the stakeholders. You'll certainly get a lot of access to both the problem sponsors, but also end users throughout the DoD. We'll have participation throughout this, not just from Air Force stakeholders, but folks from US SOCOM, the Navy, and the conventional Army. Really what we're trying to do there is help give a much broader exposure to the different problem sets, because AFRL, by the nature of what it does out of the C4 ISR Directorate, is actually supporting a lot of different agencies and a lot of different services with their technology and their capabilities. On the customer engagement side, like I said, we're focused on narrowing down from technology focus areas into more granular, specific problems that are being brought forward by the program executive offices that are often drawing technology and new capabilities from AFRL. AFRL provides, a really outstanding conduit between the R&D side of government to the end user and the programmatic adoption of new technologies. When we think about how do you grow in this space, how do you make yourself attractive for one, selection for contracts by the government, but also potential acquisition by a larger prime down the road. A big part of that is the compliance side of working with the government. So this is where, as companies make that jump from R&D into procurement, they also have to tighten up their compliance side of the house, formalize their government businesses, understand how to avoid some of the pitfalls that might come with that transition and having a more formal government contracting operation. And those are the types of things that we'll be working through, likely with the support from a number of larger prime contractors to help along the way. And then on the contracting side, so at the conclusion of the accelerator, the intent is not to shake everybody's hands and walk away. Companies that get supported by Decisive Point in their federal acquisitions endeavors for the next 12 months following the conclusion of the accelerator, and will have access for 6 months to New Lab and their facilities and the amazing resources that they have as well. So, we're really committed as we select these companies and we look at the impact that they'll have following the accelerator to make sure that they have the support at the end to be able to successfully transition and take that interest that they get, take that engagement that they have on the conclusion of the accelerator with the government, and be able to run that down and ensure that they make the transition successfully. So we're fortunate to have partnership here with AFRL. AFRL out of Rome, New York. That's where their C4ISR directorate lives. They've touched a lot of different programs within the Department of Defense, not just on the Air Force side. And they're a really unique partner in that AFRL doesn't just have, cross-cutting relevance to all the different directorates within AFRL, but also, of course, into pretty much every major weapon system program throughout the Air Force. They have, exquisite capabilities up in Rome, everything from testing and evaluation facilities. They have offsite testing facilities that are world-class and very unique to the defense space. And that direct engagement with AFRL, their Innovare program up there, which manages all of their innovation efforts, the Griffiths Institute, which is their PIA holder up out of Rome, New York as well, and their connectivity that they have to the greater Mid-Atlantic region, everything from the state of New York and the NISTAR program, which is New York's technology and innovation office out of the state government, the connectivity to the New York City EDC. AFRL is a really outstanding partner to have in this, and you'll hear from Pete LaMonica, who is really carrying the torch for the AFRL folks in ensuring that throughout this program, throughout the planning and execution, we have and will continue to receive direct engagement with the programs and relevant stakeholders provided by the Air Force.
Amazing. Thank you, Tommy. And I have to say, it's been great working with you and your team up until this point, and we're only getting started with the launch of this program. So thank you again for your efforts in working with us and getting this program going. So I just want to end with benefits and timelines. So reiterating how we're providing value to the companies. Tommy touched on this a bit in the previous slides. And so investment exposure, grant funding. I'm seeing some of these questions come up in the Q&A. This is meant to support costs for testing and validation. So this is not a program to support R&D or new product development, new IP development. IP stays with the startup. So there's no ask for ownership in IP or any free licenses for the work done here. This is a grant to support the time it would take you to come and test your product against a certain use case. So maybe access to a data set, maybe testing in some environment that we create for you at New Lab. But supporting your testing time for the 4 to 8 weeks or so that we would potentially plan for the program for you to do that testing. Access to our investor networks between Decisive Point and New Lab, which is quite expensive and can be really beneficial. And then exposure to additional federal and corporate partners in the program. So in addition to Air Force, AFRL, And that representation here, there will be exposure to other DoD entities, in addition to industry partners that New Lab and Decisive Point are constantly bringing to the table. And so that network is always there. Companies that have worked in our other studios, for example, are already being exposed to this program as we speak. And the same would happen to companies that participate in this program through the rest of our network. The build and pilot, I think, is important. As we mentioned before, the bespoke defense curriculum, and so Decisive Point is really good at just looking at you as a team, as an individual, and understanding that path that you need to take personally to get to an important defense procurement opportunity. And that will be woven into your support. So in addition to testing your product, you'll be learning, as Tommy mentioned, how to navigate these roadmaps and get into these defense opportunities. Access to our site, again, could be important, especially for some of these projects. You might need physical access to things and be able to test, let's say, a piece of hardware, a sensor in a real world environment, and we can provide that access at New Lab in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. And just being part of the community, I think, is important. A lot of companies have benefited from that, and just part of the team. And so we really support any company we work with across a variety of ways through our network. Touching on timeline, the open call began a few weeks ago, and that's where we're in now. It's going to close on May 19th. Incredible interest already in the first few days. I think it's been awesome to see. Kind of feels normal, actually, post-COVID, to see just all these startups really working hard and seeing their interesting projects come through the application. So keep those coming in. We're happy to speak with anyone offline if they want to learn more about the program or have more questions about their own projects individually. We're going to select the cohort around mid-June and get going right away into the pilot planning. So those two things will kind of happen hand in hand as we start selecting the teams. Support these projects through a sort of build phase. And so again, testing your product in certain use cases, checking off those boxes that we think you need to check off to validate what you're trying to do in the eyes of a defense use case. Ending with a demo day around the end of September, we'll have stakeholders from NSIN, from AFRL, from other potential agencies who will be joining, investors, and then we're not going to stop there. And so the teams that we think have traction, have interest, we'll keep going and supporting them into getting into programs of record and other defense opportunities, and then any other needs they might have when we talk about investment or other connections to be made through our network. And so that's us. Feel free to reach out to the email here, nsinpropel@newlab.com, for any additional questions. The link to the page is here in front of you as well. And here you can find the application for this program. I know a lot of folks are used to, as I am in my previous slide, into very dense government applications. This is not that. So it's a pretty short form application, just so we get to know who you are. And we'll learn a lot more around during our first intro calls. So feel free to apply, and we look forward to seeing that. I think now onto our Q&A. So I'd like to first introduce Pete LaMonica. So Pete, maybe you could spend a minute just introducing yourselves and AFRL.
Yeah, thanks, Satish, and thanks to the entire team from New Lab, Decisive Point, NSIN. I really appreciate all the efforts, and it's great to see all of you. My name is Pete LaMonica. I'm the branch chief, as Brianna mentioned earlier, in our high performance systems branch. It's part of our computing and communication division here at AFRL RI, and it's a pleasure to be with everybody. I saw a couple questions come up about, is this solely focused on one specific application space or one specific area within AFRL RI or across our entire enterprise? And the answer is the latter. So for those that are not familiar with AFRL RI, we really have we call it C5I, mission. So that's command and control, compute, comms, and cyber. And the I is intelligence, of course. And so really, we have four portfolios, large portfolios here at AFRL RI. The first being around autonomy, command and control. The second being around processing and exploitation. So doing the computing that we're talking about, as well as the sensor exploitation of the data, going from data to decisions. The third being connectivity and dissemination. So looking at agile, resilient comms, as well as ways to disseminate data. And then the last one being our cyber CTC or portfolio. And the cyber portfolio here really contributes in the cyber physical domain, right? So cyber physical sensing and things like IoT devices. And so, happy to talk a little bit more about AFRL, but I just wanted to whet everybody's appetite. Really, we cut across that landscape, and looking forward to interacting with everybody on the line and meeting you all here in the not too distant future. So I'll turn it back over to Satish at this point. Thanks.
Pete, that's great. Thank you. And I think we're going to dive in a bit more on the topics. I think there's a couple, and Tommy, a couple of these will come your way, but a couple of logistics questions on just eligibility and things like this. And so I'll answer a few, but Tommy, it'd be great if you took the one around, US-based companies versus not. So the first is certainly the program is not focused around New York. New York is where we are running the program, but we are recruiting across the nation. And so you're not required to move your business to New York to be part of the program or eventually, benefit from the program. There will be moments during the program where you will need to come to New York. And so, for example, if testing is better suited to happen over the month or two in New York at our site in Brooklyn, then we would expect you to come for that. There's a demo day that's really important to be at in September, but these are things that we work out with each individual company. There isn't just a sort of a fixed requirement to spend a certain amount of time in New York. And so one, you don't have to geographically move your business to New York, and two, recruitment of companies is not solely based in the Mid-Atlantic region. And so Tommy, if you can answer just the thinking around working with US-based companies and versus not.
Yeah, so for anyone that's worked with the government before, there's really two main considerations here. One is ownership and one is control, right? So as you evaluate if your company is the right fit, you have to look at and determine, one, is the company owned by US persons? Is it a US company, so domiciled in the United States? And two, is it controlled by US persons? They're not always the same thing. A lot has to do with the company's specific board composition, the bylaws that the company has itself. So it really is a case-by-case basis. In general, can there be participation by non-US persons? Yes, but it comes down to what's the technology that you're working on? Where's the company and the technology and the development being actually physically done, right? The R&D work should be done within the United States. That doesn't exclude things like engineering services that you might be having done abroad, or specific components that you have to purchase for your technology. So I would say the broadest answer I could give is, evaluating control and ownership. And then after that, if you have specific questions, that's really a case-by-case evaluation discussion.
Cool. And I would say in terms of the type of company that we're looking for, certainly, companies that have products and technology and validate in the commercial space is great, but it's not a requirement. So we can work with companies that are a little bit earlier than that. Tommy, would you say a sweet spot would be those that are eligible for SVR phase 1 type awards would be kind of as early as we would go?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about, on the government scale, a TRL level 3 is probably most important on the early side. And thinking through, and there's a lot of companies I'm sure on this call that have gone through the SBIR program, either with the Air Force or with another component. When we're thinking about new entrants into the government market, I think largely, does winning an SBIR phase 1 mean that you're like a well-established government contractor? No, of course it doesn't. So we welcome companies that are either, in the SBIR program or at the stage where that type of award and R&D funding is appropriate. And really, who is this probably most attractive to? Those companies that have, some exposure to government. It's not a meaningful part of their business, or they're pursuing it as a new emerging part of their business. Thinking about those companies that are in, phase 2 of their SBIR, and they need to find a home for transition beyond their current customer, translating their phase 2 into a phase 3. So I think it's a wide gamut. We're most focused on solving the particular problem sets that are being provided to us by AFRL and by the relevant PEOs. So essentially, I guess the simple answer here is don't self-select. If you think you can solve the problem, you should apply. Whether you've never done anything in government, or whether you're, driving through the SBIR process and well into a phase 2 or beyond. I think in certain cases, even companies that are beyond and have gone into some other R&D or prototyping type contract, like other transaction, is still appropriate for this type of program.
Great. And I think answering that early stage was another question. Certainly, Decisive Point and New Lab are always working with startups on a longer term basis. And so we do plan on having subsequent cohorts here if your tech is too early, but we're happy to talk to you, but perhaps we can give you some feedback initially and sort of comment on the direction you're heading if that's useful. And so as Tommy said, certainly don't self-select. Feel free to reach out, and we're happy to share more about that. Pete, this question's over. I'm gonna fire this question over to you. We've been speaking about dual use. We've been speaking about commercially validated technologies. From your perspective, why is that important to have for this program and in companies that you're looking at, understanding what they've done in the commercial space?
Yeah, absolutely, Satish. It's a great question. And, I think, whether it's the Air Force or really any one of the services across the DoD, we can't go at this alone. Our former Assistant Secretary for Acquisition and Tech and Technology and Logistics, Dr. Will Roper, I think said it best that, commercial industry outspends the DoD 4 to 1. And so, we need to leverage what's being done in the commercial space and look at innovative ways to take that capability and apply it to DoD hard problems. And that's exactly what we're doing here. Satish, you did a great job in your oratory in the beginning, talking about the specific problem that we're looking at here, which is really around the sensing grid and looking at sensing to sense making, but also how we connect different devices, how we fuse data amongst them, and so forth. And so that really, cuts across this entire directorate here. It also includes, some of the work being done at our sister directorate out at Wright Pat, the sensors directorate. So yeah, we're excited about this. Like I said, we can't go at this alone.
Great. And Pete, just sticking with you here, like one topic that a question came up was just interest in blockchain and sort of the analytics that come with that. Do you have any thoughts there on how AFRL looks at blockchain and certainly what's happening in the commercial space, which there's plenty of activity there?
Yeah, I would say that clearly there is interest there. We're looking at some ways internally to apply blockchain, in ledger capability, whether it's on C2 on the command and control side of the house, or for cybersecurity. So absolutely, there is applicability in that. I would say that it's more than likely, a lower on the priority scale here of what we're talking about, but clearly it's still applicable.
Yeah, and I think it's what you're hearing from Pete, Tommy, and I is definitely going broad because as you can imagine, Air Force, AFRL, Defense, like there's just a variety of challenges and opportunities, and so we're going to find that out together with you. And so, a question here was, let's say in the area of sensors, will the problem sets be emerged from AFRL? Absolutely. That's what the point of the convening and the work we're doing is. We have a sensor company in front of us. We convene a workshop with them and Decisive Point and Pete and his team, and we have a back and forth, and that's how you identify the use case. And we think doing that up front can be quite valuable, especially for companies that have this technology and product in flight already. And so there will be a very much a double clicking on what these use cases are for the companies that we're engaging with in the program. Tommy, over to you. There was a question around sort of how do we compare ourselves to the AFWorks SBIR program? Certainly, you can apply for both, of course, because we're here doing something different. But I was hoping maybe you could speak a bit more on how we're different.
Sure. I mean, we're certainly complementary to that great program. AFWorks is largely leveraging the SBIR program in a number of different novel ways that has really increased access for early stage companies to pursue SBIRs with the government. If you are an AFWERX SBIR company, this is a natural transition and opportunity for you to continue your engagement with the Air Force. AFRL is ultimately deeply involved with the AFWERX program. This is just another way to get further exposure to customers on both on the end user side, but also on the purchasing side. So the folks who have the budget, who have the mandate, the congressional appropriated funds to actually continue to pursue and purchase and onboard new technologies. So I would say it's very complementary. It is, of course, not an SBIR. We do not use SBIR funding for this. It is a program that is coming out of NSIN's budget. Definitely not the same, but a complement to what they're doing at AFWERX and, the SBIR program more broadly across DoD and the other government agencies that leverage it.
Yeah, that's great. And then I think that answered that was leading to some of the questions around the funding mechanism here. And so as we see on the site, there's about $200,000 available, and we're looking to source 8 to 10 teams to support. And that those grants are really quick grants that cover costs. And so the cost of doing the testing within a week's time frame, not a year's time frame, which is maybe traditional for other R&D development programs. So that validation, along with the advisory services we're providing and the access to the DoD use cases, will hopefully lead to the bigger procurement opportunities down the road, which we think we can bring to the table much more quickly. And so feel free to ask more questions there, but just wanted to have the folks that asked that question to have that in mind.
And one thing I'd add there, Satish, is the objective here is for this to be really hands-on, right? We want at the end, it's not intended to be a pitch at the end, right? We're going to have these companies engaging directly with the AFRL teams, with the PEOs throughout the program, building relationships, understanding what the problems they're trying to solve, understanding what the vehicles they have on the backside of this program to actually procure these new technologies. So, this shouldn't be on demo day at the end of the program, a cold start where all of a sudden, someone from AFRL or someone from one of the PEOs is just for the first time seeing this company and understanding what they're trying to solve. Our intent is to create these durable partnerships throughout the program.
Yeah, that's great. And Pete, thanks, Tommy. And Pete, a question to you again on topic from the AFRL standpoint around cybersecurity, just in general. And of course, part of that is part of this program. Are we talking about cybersecurity as it comes to physical systems like sensors or IoT, or how do you look at interest in the software side?
Yeah, so I will say that there's clearly interest in both. We have an entire portfolio here that's focused not just on defensive cyber, but also offensive cyber as well. But really in this application, yeah, we're looking at both as mentioned in the question about the cybersecurity of both the hardware as well as the software running on it.
And in terms of areas of around domestic infrastructure, and so we talk about systems, and I know sensing and data certainly is relevant to transportation and energy, but anything else we should be thinking about that the folks out there should be thinking about when it comes to infrastructure around cyber or resilience? That's the Pete.
Yeah, sure.
Pete first, and Tom can go next.
I think there's really the applicability here is very wide and far. You mentioned earlier about the work that you're already doing with Verizon and 5G and telecom. I think like again, you mentioned about manufacturing. I think there's also interest in whether it's oil and gas companies, whether it's manufacturing companies, right? We're all looking at ways to implement, different sensors, smart sensors, along our infrastructure.
Yeah.
And so, the same is true for the DoD and in particular for the Air Force, right? So, part of our challenge is looking at, innovative ways to share data amongst different platforms that we have that are out there collecting data. So whether it be ground sensors, air sensors, space sensors, et cetera, we're looking at ways to plug all that together and make sense at the edge, at the tactical edge. And so, so again, there's wide applicability. I also think about, even the smart city application, right? When you look at the different types of sensors that we're seeing some cities employ, not just EO cameras, but also looking at things like acoustic sensors to detect gunshots or car accidents, things along those lines, to immediately alert law enforcement. So, what are some of the ways that we can get innovative and get after this problem a little differently, as opposed to how we've done it traditionally, where basically all of our data as it gets collected gets pumped back to a ground station, and then we have human analysts doing a lot of the legwork there. So again, looking at innovative ways to really revolutionize that process.
Yeah, and I think that reminds me of another point to make here too, is that, which I think is really important for a lot of the early stage tech companies out there, even ones that raised, and when we say early stage, we do mean some pre-seed up to Series C. Your investors are investing in you to pursue a certain lane, and when you think about sensors, these are platforms, they're lily pads from which you can apply a lot of different applications, but you have to pick a lane and pursue that. The program like this, I think, offers another lane. And so an accelerated path to getting into a really important and and potentially high opportunity procurement environment is what we're bringing to the table here. And it's something we've done at New Lab across a variety of other studios. Tommy, I was hoping we could end with you on an example of work you've done with the early stage tech company in the past that you think is an exemplary use case of what we're trying to do in the program.
Sure, and this probably covers the last topic as well. When we think about these different technologies, and what is the government looking for? What are defense solutions, right? A lot of this, of course, blends with civil problem sets as well. If anything, new technologies has really increased the attack surface, if you will, of what constitutes a national security problem. I think a great example of this, and a company that both we at Decisive Point and New Lab have worked with, and then of course NSIN. They've gone through NSIN's some of NSIN's programs before. They're an SBIR winner through AFWorks. Is a company called SimpleSense, and I'm sure many of you know Alex and Eric from that team, but a team that started out trying to solve a very specific problem in the civil space around helping first responders more quickly reach people in need. And of course, the non-obvious application here is that, well, people live on military bases as well. There are resources both external to the base and internal to the base that have the exact same problem. And how do we get all these things and systems to talk to each other? And they have just done a fantastic job navigating what they have to do to make all these disparate people and systems work together, by engaging both with government on the federal and the military side, and then locally as well. So it is often not obvious to a company when they start out down their journey of engaging with the government where they're going to land, but it's the folks that are willing to solve tough social government public problems that have often great success in defense as well, because at the end of the day, defense is a social program. It's a service that's provided by the government for its citizens. So hats off to those guys. They are a New Lab company. They've been very successful within the government space, and a great example. And I will also add a leadership team that is very willing to give back and engage with other companies and help them understand their journey as they've navigated the space as well.
Great. And I think it's a great way to end this info session. Again, feel free for all of you out there to write to nsinpropel@newlab.com for any additional questions you have. We'd be happy to speak with you. We have another info session on May 13th, so 6 days before the application deadline. So definitely get those applications in. Tommy, Pete, Brianna, thank you so much for running this great session. I think the folks on the line learned a lot, as we can tell by the questions, and looking forward to running this program with all of you.